Captain Hung Kao is here, retired U.S. Navy, and he's running for U.S. Senate in Virginia. Captain, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you doing today?
Good to talk to you again, bro. Virginia is looking more and more in place, sir. What are you seeing with the voter registration? And now people are voting in Virginia. So give us some hopeful news here.
Oh, well, look, if you had a race to bet on, this is it, because we were drafting him the whole time, just like in a NASCAR race, and then you shoot up at the last minute. And you saw I raised just as much money as he did in the third quarter. This is a 30-year, career politician, also the former chairman of DNC. But in Virginia, the first day of voting, we had 20,000 more people that voted than they did in 2020. But, in 2020, it was leaning 40% Democrat. This year, it's leaning 16%. So we closed the margin by 24%. And then the next.
Sorry. You made a joke. Sorry, slow down. You made a joke in the debate the other day that you don't mess around with Asians and math. Okay, so now numbers are out on the radio. So give it to me one more time. I want to make sure I know what you're saying there, because this is it sounds like good news. So, and I want to make sure I understand it. So what happened so far?
So in Virginia, we have 5 days of early voting, and it began on September 20th. And on that day, there were 20,000 more people that voted in 2024 than they did in 2020 in the first day of voting. And in 2020, it was leaning 40% Democrat. So 40% more Democrats voted on that day than Republicans did. But here's the thing. In 2024, it's only 16% more Democrats. So we closed that gap by 24%.
Got it. Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's big.
But here's the thing. On the following Monday, right, usually it drops down drastically, but this time it doubled. Twice as many people voted on the second day of voting than they did in 2020, and it was leaning 14% Democrat, whereas before it was leaning 38% Democrat. So we are closing gap. What happens usually on election day is, we start winning, but then they bring in the early votes and the absentee ballots, and then they inundate us. But this time it's changed drastically. I mean, we're seeing the numbers every day, and it's going about 12 to 14% Democrat instead of the traditional 40. So Republicans are showing up in droves, and I'm telling you right now, there's so much energy in the when I drive around the Commonwealth of Virginia, all the way down to the Southwest, or even to Hampton Roads, even Richmond. We're doing really well in the Richmond area. And so I think Tim Kaine, this is Hillary Clinton's running mate. Remember, the only thing people remember from this guy is he got stuck on I-95 with a bottle of Dr. Pepper during a snowstorm. He hasn't done anything for anybody.
Yeah, Tim Kaine was the Tim Walz of 2016. I was talking with a guy the other day, and we were like, what was that guy's name who ran? What was the V? Like, we were like, Tim's this bland vanilla white guy. And this, who's the guy who ran for? We couldn't think of it. And it's like, oh yeah, Tim Kaine, another Tim. Just so nothing. Just a pile of nothing.
Well, they're both from Minnesota, right? I don't know what happens in Minnesota, but they're both from Minnesota. They're both horrible governors. And on November 5th, both will be failed vice presidential candidates.
That's right. There you go. I dig it. Tell us the importance of locking in the vote. It's insane that Virginians get 45 days to do this, but that is the rule right now. Why is it important to vote early?
Because then it allows us to bank the votes now, and then I wouldn't be reaching out to those hardcore Republican voters. I can now use my money to hit the undecideds and the middle road people. And that's what we want to do. There's only a finite amount of money, and so every text message is 5 cents. Every mailer we send is over $1. Commercials are $1.93 million per week in Virginia, and we don't have the abundant money that Tim Kaine does. So we target basically the voters through their cable box, or they're geofencing their area, and that's how we hit them. And we're very tactical in our ability to reach people, but then it gives us a strategic overlook.
Okay, that's it. So if you're a traditionalist like me and do not want to vote early, do it because you're a conservative and you like to save money. So if you like to save money, vote early so that Hung Kao in this case, but whatever state you're in, doesn't have to waste their money convincing you to vote. And you're like, yeah, I will. But they don't know that. So go do it, and then they can actually spend their money on the people who are maybe on the fence or otherwise wouldn't vote or whatever. So save money for the candidate of your choice and vote early. Think of you voting early as giving them money, because now they have that money to spend on other people. Would the independents or who are you targeting? Like, are you targeting
independents and leaning
moderates?
and very moderate Democrats? Because here's the thing: the blue-haired, far left people are going to vote for whomever. They're like, hey, vote for Joe Biden. Okay, no, it's now Kamala Harris. Okay, and next it'll be Tim Walz. Okay, but here's the thing: is we're reaching out to people asking a very basic question: are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? If the answer is yes, you're probably an illegal alien. I'm going to turn you into ICE. But the fact is that no one's better. It's harder for us to put food on the table. We can't put gas in our cars, and we can't buy a home. And these people the left is they're basically taking care of illegal aliens better than they are Americans. You saw this in Hurricane Helene response, right? We're spending $1 billion a day to house and feed illegal aliens when we can medevac Americans off their rooftops, put them in the 4-star hotels that you're putting the illegal aliens in, and take care of them. Take care of the Americans first. Meanwhile, they spent $156 million and they sent it to Lebanon. They spent the equivalent of the entire budget of the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps, and they sent it to Ukraine, instead of taking care of Americans first. And they say climate's their biggest thing, but then they keep robbing and raiding the funds from FEMA. If climate is such a big issue, then why do you keep raiding money from FEMA?
Okay, so what you just said right there is a very compelling message to me and our audience. We've been making it a lot recently. In your experience campaigning, does that connect to your average independent, I don't like politics, I don't like parties? Does that connect with them too, what you just said?
Absolutely. I mean, because they see what's going on. In Virginia, we had a grandmother named Melody Waldeck who was killed during a carjacking by an illegal alien, right? And then down in Chesapeake, this young 19-year-old student named Lauren Nicole Leonard was killed by an illegal alien. In Manassas, Virginia, a 12-year-old girl was abducted by an illegal alien. So without a border, every state is a border state and every city is a sanctuary city, and we end up getting the crimes that come in. MS-13, for example, it's now in Loudoun County, one of the safest counties in Virginia, and now you see this kid that came into middle school with a gun. They kicked him out, and the next year they bring him into Loudoun Valley High School. He's all tatted up, and parents are in uproar, and so what the school board does is they shut it down. So it's time to put Americans first, and that's what I've done my entire career. I came here as a refugee from Vietnam. I fought for our country for 25 years in Navy Special Operations. I fought in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia. And I'm not done fighting for us. I'm never going to put anybody above the American people.
When you say you fought in war, do you mean you actually went to war, or did you, like Tim Kaine, go to war?
No, Tim Kaine never served. That guy never put on the uniform. You mean Tim Walz, who pretended...
Tim Walz. Sorry, there you go. I got him confused. Okay, did you Tim Walz serve?
The terrible Tims from Minnesota. I know, the twins from Minnesota. But no, yes, I actually went to war. I went many times, and I had to write letters to my son, who my oldest son, when my wife was 8 months pregnant with him, saying, "Son, you're now 10 years old. You're double digits. You're 16 years old. You're about to drive a car. Here, you're 18 years old. You're about to be a man. This is what it means to be a man." We did these things because this country is worth fighting and dying for. I've been to 40 countries in my life. I ran away from communism. I know what it's like to wake up without a flag to stand under or a country called my own. And I'm not going to let that happen to my kids, your kids, or our grandchildren.
Do you have those letters still?
No, I burned them afterwards. I mean, it's kind of morbid, but it's just one of those things where, we were prepared.
Wow.
I mean, when we were invading Iraq, they were expecting 40% casualties. And so, you never knew you were going to come home. My wife was 8 months pregnant, but she knew that this is a calling our country needed.
Wow, sorry, I'm taken back by I'm like envisioning you writing those letters in the first place. My son turns 8 this weekend. So just imagine writing those letters and the idea of not being here for those birthdays, and that's horrific. And then you make it home. I think that's interesting. I wonder what I would do. Like, my first instinct is like, turn it into a book. but maybe like your instinct too, which is like, no, I'm here now. Like I can actually give these messages myself.
Yes. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's nothing you want to do. I mean, it's nothing I want to brag about. It's just one of those things where you did it. We all did it. We wrote letters home to just in case something happens. It's like break glass in case of war and rip this in case I'm not here anymore.
You mentioned fleeing Vietnam. Again, I didn't see much of the town hall last night. Just a couple clips. One of the questions from the guy, and it was all in Spanish, was I'm uneasy with the process that you have become the nominee, but it wasn't even that. It was more the process of how Kamala was, or how Joe was kicked out, and you just suddenly became the nominee, and you could just tell that this guy was probably from a country where that type of stuff has happened a lot, and he doesn't like it. Smells to him, He's like, I actually probably fled this. I'm guessing his story is he fled a country where that kind of stuff happens a lot. And he didn't like what he's seeing right here. And you fled from a communist country as well. What's the thing that native-born Americans you think aren't smelling, that we don't see happening and stewing, that you're like, oh, hey, everyone, let me tell you?
Well, they're slowly boiling us in a pot like frogs, right? I mean, they turn up the heat little by little, and you don't recognize it. But you look at what Tim Walz did, which is he had a snitch line during COVID, so you can call on your neighbors. In Michigan, they have a snitch line now for kids to tell on their parents if they're not safeguarding their guns. I mean, that's exactly what Mao did, right? During the Cultural Revolution, kids would turn their parents in for not following the laws and the rules. And then, then you have people like Kamala Harris who's saying, hey, just because you have a gun doesn't mean the police can't just knock on your door and go check and make sure you're handling it correctly. And what's handling correctly, what's safeguarding it in their books, and so this is exactly what communism is. I mean, they want to take away your guns because then you have no way to fight back, and this is what the left's ideology is. They want to turn Americans against Americans. That's why we have these DEI policies instead of bringing us together as Americans and seeing how beautiful this country is. And I think it's time for immigrants like myself to remind America how beautiful this country is and how blessed we are to live in a free country.